Congressman DeSaulniers' Immigration Town Hall. Thank you for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. I'd also like to start to introduce our lovely staff we have in the building who work so hard behind the scenes. First, we have our wonderful intern, V, our district scheduler, Brooke Wilson, our community relations director, Caroline Francois, our senior outreach coordinator, Kaylee DeLand, our deputy district director, Ryan Thomas Brown, and finally, our district director, Janessa Oriole. Now, I'm going to go over a brief run of show and then we will get started. Now, as you may have noticed when you walked in, there was a question card on each seat. If you have a question you'd like to ask the congressman, please fill out your question card and we'll get to as many questions as possible. Now, looking around the room, as you may have guessed, there are a lot of people here, so we will not get to every single question. But I will note, if your question card is complete fully and legibly, with your contact information complete at the top, we will give you a response after the town hall. If you have a complete question card now you would like to submit, please feel free to raise it in the air, and one of my colleagues who are wearing all black will be happy to collect it from you. Any complete question cards now? Any last remaining question cards for submission? So we have one in the front row. Thank you all. A few more question cards in the middle over here. Great participation, thank you so much. Great, next we have several elected officials in the building with us this evening. I'd like to introduce some of them. First, we have Luz Gomez from East Bay Mud. We have Laura Nakamura, the Vice Mayor of Concord. We also have some members from the Danville Town Council. We have Councilman Mark Bilotz. And Councilman Robert Storer.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening for this very special and important event, especially in these times that we're in currently. My name is Robert Storer. I've been with the town of Danville for 24 years, so I started about in 2000. Mark DeSaulniers began his career in 1991, and he started off as a council member in Concord, became mayor, graduated to the Board of Supervisors, went to the Assembly, went to the State Senate, and is now in Congress. Seldom do you find a person that has touched every form of government. Somebody who understands every level of government from local to state to Congress. And that federal level is extremely important. Mark, over the course of the whole time I've known him for 24 years, has always been accessible. He's always answered our questions. He's always been involved in each one of our communities. And now that he has District 10, we see him all the time. And if we need to contact his office, there isn't anybody in their office that won't give us an answer or call us back. And Mark, we can't thank you enough for that. That's absolutely incredible. So it's absolutely my pleasure to introduce one of the most experienced and knowledgeable members of Congress that happens to be our District 10 Congressman. Mark, thank you for all that you do, and welcome to the town of Danville.
Now it is. All right. We're going to go through this PowerPoint. Maybe show of hands, how many people have been to one of our town halls before? Oh, you frequent flyers, I love it. There's no discount. So you know we go through these. This is subject specific for immigration. We do these subject specific town halls, a lot of you know this, on different subject areas. We're working on an environmental one for probably next month or two. So we'll do the same thing. We'll have a resource fair with environmental groups and agencies. And then we'll do part of this subject specific, but then on immigration. But then I know people have questions on a lot of things. So happy to try to answer questions about tariffs or anything else. So we'll go through this. It is a dense one. We're trying to make them simpler to digest. If we go too fast, as always, they'll be available on our social media and our website if you want to go back and follow with us. So let's go ahead. Janessa. Here's a drum roll to see if technology works. Why? This is just something I'm explaining. This is our first time with this as a PowerPoint. Right now you've got a lot of members doing town halls that are political. They're doing that on their campaign funding. This is a government town. So if sometimes you want me to be more political, the reason I'm not in this venue, and I can do it, but this is taxpayer funded, so the ethics says you can't do certain things. So campaign contributions, obviously, making endorsements, suggesting local groups to join, and directing attendees to websites that are on the political side. This has always been the case in law. It makes common sense. This is taxpayer funding, but politics and government obviously intersect, so it's sometimes hard for all of us to figure out where that line is. But I just wanted to explain, particularly now, because some of my colleagues and friends are doing very large political campaigns. They're raising money to pay for the space, security, and other things. So I just we're trying to explain that to people because sometimes it gets a little frustrating in this environment. This is our district. Since you've all been here, so many of you before, there are 435 House districts in the United States, and this is one of them. We just redistricted every 10 years based on the census. We have to redistrict. In California, we chose 20 years ago to take this away from the legislature and have an independent commission. So it's the second time they did it. My district used to run from Richmond, and actually the border was the middle of the bay with San Francisco and Marin, and it didn't go all the way east or all the way south that this one does. It used to end at the Danville town line, and now they've pushed me out of that area, redistricting, and we've got San Ramon, part of Dublin, and then all of East County except that little indentation is Discovery Bay, which is in Congressman Harder's district. And north of me is Congressman Garamendi, and west of me was Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Let's see. All right, immigration reform. I just like to frame this, one of our challenges in this country, and it's repeated itself in the history of this country. There's a really good recent book called The Unguarded Gate about another wave of immigration in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where it was controversial as it is today. And that was mostly directed at Eastern European and Italian immigration. So we have to go back, and the Congress has to work on this. What are the rules? What are the guidelines? And they haven't been static, like everything in this country since its founding. If you could get here when the country was founded, that was your approval, your legal way to get here. And then it's changed over time. Right now we do, from my perspective, we need to take action. Our immigration policies are outdated. We're not funding the institutions that provide for them, and the laws are contradictory. And they're contradictory at every level of government. And in my view, it's been delivered by some of my colleagues, and there's been a lot written about this. Starting in 2013, that was the session before I got there. This was called the Gang of Eight. It was 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats. They came up with a bill that provided for more security and gave a pathway to citizenship, based on criteria like not breaking the law, having a job, 20 years. So it passed out of the Senate 68 to 32. We now know, thanks to former Speaker John Boehner, what happened. Members from the Freedom Caucus went in and told him, as the speaker, Republican speaker was in their caucus, that they didn't want it to come to the floor because they didn't want to have to take a position one way or the other on it. So it went away. So it's still stuck. Then there was another one after Boehner with Representative Hurd, and a Republican from Texas. He was a former CIA agent, represented the largest part of the border. With Pete Aguilar, a wonderful California member, he's the chair of the Democratic Caucus now. They worked for months together to put a similar bill together. Again, Republican majority did not want it to come to the floor, and it didn't. And then, let's see, that was 18. That was the second one, and then the most recent one is on the next slide, I guess. So this just happened just 4 months before the election, got a lot of press. Senator Lankford, conservative Republican from Oklahoma, put a lot of work into this. It was bipartisan, similar to the other two. And then candidate Trump publicly said, I don't want this to go any further, and that's one of his quotes. So I start that. This is my opinion. Granted, other people disagree, but this is a crisis that could be solved if we work together, and there have been real efforts by Republicans and Democrats to do that. It's not going to solve everything, but it would update our needs, and it would also provide more resources. As I said, more judges, more courts for immigration, more enforcement, more technology, and more physical structures at the border and in ports. But when that other book, there's also a book called The Age of Acrimony, that's post-Civil War, similar. And that book is really interesting for our times that we live in, because he looks at the telegraph as being similar to social media. All of a sudden, the country went from getting news from Washington or New York or other parts of the country by Pony Express and mail, took months. And then the telegraph changed all that, sort of like technology and social media has, so that people are getting information really quickly. And then people are starting newspapers that were very partisan, and it's created a lot of tension then. Then you had immigration because of steam travel, where ships were being able to bring immigrants in, and the Irish potato famine. I'm primarily Irish. I got a French last name from my dad's side, so I used to listen to my Irish grandparents in Boston talk about how they came and their grandparents came, or their parents came. And it was a similar problem, but technology changed it because steamships made it easier to bring people, and the Industrial Revolution needed cheap labor. And then there was a third. So it was social media, travel, and there was a third thing he talks about. But it's a terrific book because it illustrates that although we're in very unique, trying times when it comes to immigration and technology, history does have a tendency to repeat itself, and we can learn from that. I found it somewhat consoling, and you might too, to read about these books on history, just because sometimes it always feels like this is the worst of all times, and it is very challenging, and it could be the worst if consequences play out wrongly, but we've been through similar to this. This is a quote that I love from Bobby Kennedy, just talking about the importance in America of immigration. And why it's so much a part of what makes us an amazing place, but it also creates challenges. Nobody in human history has tried to bring so many diverse communities together in one governed country. And it's wonderful, but it's also a challenge frequently in this friction. So let's see, I've been to the border a number of times as in Congress and before. These were all pre-COVID, so I need to go again, and I'm planning on it. But it's fascinating. You can read about these things and see them on TV or social media, but there's nothing like actually physically going and talking to people, multiple people who are involved in it. This is just part of why immigration is important right now. You've probably read this, and it's important for this area. The tech industry and a lot of the innovation in the Bay Area happened with people who weren't Native Americans. So 47% of the Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants and their children. The second bullet I was really interested in, higher income. which is, of course, part of America when we work. Our kids do better. Our generation has a real challenge with that, especially around here. I have 2 kids, and the cost of housing in California is daunting for their generation. So you can read the rest of them. This is one I've heard for years, and you can, usually we put where we get these from, so we will provide these if people doubt the veracity of these, but they're peer-reviewed groups. But, you know, we hear a lot of talk about the quality of people that are being targeted right now, and it's just, this is a trend that's been consistent, that immigrants actually have a lower crime rate than the general public. So just stereotypes. It's not that to say that there aren't bad people. There are bad people and bad behavior in all groups of humans, but stereotypes aren't always accurate. So these are some of the things that this administration's done. I'm not going to go through each one, but they are what they are. And a lot of this, right now, the environment is, there's a process. Since I've been involved in government for a long time, the way that this democracy works is you create laws, and that requires a majority of the governing body to pass them. In most cases, there are supermajorities, in some cases required by Constitution or the rules of the governing body, whether you're on the city council or the Congress. You introduce an idea for a bill, the lawyers look at it, it's constitutional, you go to work. It usually goes through committees where people have subject area experts, either the electeds or the staff. Then you have to get it voted on, and you have to get a majority vote. And you have to usually do it again. In the Congress, it goes to the Rules Committee, of which I used to be the vice chair of. All bills go to the Rules Committee, and then it gets referred to a committee of jurisdiction. So transportation, if it has something to do with transportation, it will go to transportation. And then if there's a money part of it, then obviously it has to go to the fiscal committee, which would be appropriations. So they get referred, and then they go to the floor, you get a majority vote, then you start all over again in the other house, and the president signs it or vetoes it. That's the way laws are made. There is discretion in the administration on how they administer the laws, and departments have some discretion because we give them to them. But you can't just sign an executive order and overrule the law. You have to go back through the process and get an author to carry a bill to fix the law. So that's part of the challenge we have right now. You'll see in another slide, 93% of the cases brought against his executive orders he's lost. In his first term, he lost 78%. So it's good for publicity, I guess, just to say you're doing these things, but there's a process where people go and challenge it in court, and we try to challenge it in the Congress too. If we get 3 Republicans to go along with us and every Democrat agreed on one of these things, then it'd go through the process. All right. Next. So there's just more similar. So, and you can see how I voted. And I think we have this too. There are right now 120 cases pending in addition to the 93%, and some of those are part of the 93 because they're on appeal. But we've introduced 50 bills, Democrats, to challenge some of what he's done. But when you introduce a bill, the Speaker decides whether it goes to the Rules Committee or it starts the process. That's the way Congress or the House runs. Not all legislative bodies do this. In California, every member gets to introduce 40 bills for a 2-year cycle, and they have to get a hearing at the Rules Committee. So I personally think that's a better model. I used to represent California on the National Conference of State Legislatures, so I go around to all the states. States have different versions of that, but most of them, you're allowed a certain amount of bills, and they have to get a hearing, which I think is a better way, rather than going through all the trouble of creating legislation, putting it in, and then one person, it's one person with power, just says we're not going to have a hearing on this. Let's see. So I mentioned much of this. The courts have been pushing back. A federal judge today on the Garcia case made a decision. She was a Trump-appointed judge to say that he's got to go ahead with facilitating that gentleman's return. And right now we're in sort of a constitutional crisis about what happens next. So these are just some other specifics. I won't go through each one of them. This is what we do. Our staff is we do a lot of Social Security in the office, a lot of immigration, and this helps facilitate our work because we get all the partners we work with so that if you have questions, we can help. But we spend a lot of time, you read about the things we spend time on, the things that catch the media, but I'm very proud of the retail part of the jobs we do, which is town halls. But we insist, I insist, that when you call our office, a human being, when we're open, will answer the phone. You don't get that from a lot of places when you call. You go to voicemail, then they'll open a case. I get to see the cases. I can go in and access them, and I can see what's happening with the case until the case is solved. And sometimes we have to tell people we can't help them, but at least there's a process, and we contact the federal agency in immigration. We'll open a case, and we'll decide where we go, and then we get a decision, a legal decision, as to what that person is allowed or isn't. We advocate when there's discretion. All right? And that's our contacts. So with that, Mr. Harvard, I'm teasing him. Can I? Why would you want to leave working for a member of Congress to go to law school? And it would be embarrassing for me to tell you all the law schools he got accepted by, but he just had accepted one because he went to Cambridge, Massachusetts and walked around Harvard. And now he's going to be at Harvard Law School. Who says smart people don't work for government? Although you're leaving, so I don't know what that says.
Thank you, Congressman. Now we're going to head into the question and answer section. This is a final reminder. If you have any completed question cards you'd like to submit for review, please wave them in the air. I'd be happy to answer them for you. A few over there. Thank you.
This is my sort of Vanna White thing. People think that we self-select these. Few of you remember who she was. So I'm just pulling them out at random.
Another quick reminder. As I said earlier, we will not get to every single question, but as long as your information is legibly written on the card, we will give you a response after the town hall.
Even though we've done a lot of these, they're always organic town halls.
First question is from Colleen. Colleen asks, is there a plan to stop this administration from ignoring court orders, disappearing people, and taking stronger real action? The Democrats seem weak, disorganized, and lacking an action plan. We are a country on for leadership, and it's missing.
Yeah, and everybody hear me? Can you hear me? There we go. And I'll hold it up to my mouth. So we've heard a lot of this, and I think we deserve some of the criticism. We weren't prepared for this. I mean, the minority party in the Congress and Democrats. And I'll say, speaking for myself, I don't think anybody could have predicted the level of intensity. Maybe you could in the first 3 months. So we do have what's called a rapid response team. It's led by two wonderful members, Jamie Raskin, who's 2 degrees from Harvard, one from law school. He's a constitutional attorney. He's a good friend. We served on the Oversight and Rules Committee together, and Joe Neguse, who's another attorney from Colorado. So we now we're really ramped up. We have partners outside, and we have filed amicus briefs against a lot of these cases. So we're working with groups outside and inside. There are available websites where you can go and get in real time what's happening and who's behind the cases. So I agree with the sentiment, but I think we've ramped it up significantly and we're being successful. I'll tell you one thing about the time I've been in politics. It's just it's a new world about getting information to people. Used to be you got an article in the local newspaper, no offense to the TV people from local TV. Now it's reaching people. We just did a survey in the Democratic caucus. If you're under 45 nationally, 85% of the people get their news from YouTube, Facebook. If you're over 45, like I am, and many of you are, we still get our news from what's called traditional media. So ABC, NBC, Fox, those things. So it is a struggle to get people's attention right now, and we're trying to figure that out. So we're working hard, and you feel free to send us questions about where you can get that. On the ethics side, we're going to be doing towns like AOC and Bernie are on the political side, so I can give more of that information on that side. And we provide that on that side. So we're doing more, but I want to say that you're right on this all the time and being successful with outside partners.
Second question is from Maid. Maid asks, what is your plan to protect the First Amendment rights of students to speak their mind without fear of retribution from the government?
Again, we're going to have to go to the courts, and we're going to have to win elections. I am a senior member of the Education Labor Committee, and I'm a senior member of the Higher Education and Workforce Subcommittee. I think I'm a second senior on that now. So all of these things that's happening to higher education, we've got to push back. Since I just tease you about where you're going to school, I'm proud of Harvard for standing up. We've got to have more higher institutions. Now, the whole point, since we're in a middle school, of education is open people up, to let people be able to think for themselves. And you can be a conservative, a progressive, but let people make that choice by being open to things. And if there are biases, people should be aware of them, either in teachers or administrators. But I think sometimes people think, some of my conservative friends, I mean, you can go to James Madison University, for instance. That's very well known but for being funded by the Koch network folks. I've had a colleague who was a teacher there. So you know what the biases are when you go in, if there are. But the essential need for higher education and education is to open young people's minds so they're curious and they can problem solve. And it's, when it works, we struggle, but historically, I mean, Benjamin Franklin said that the best investment at the Constitutional Convention, the best investment America can ever make is in education. And that's still true. Whether it's organized education, private or public, or just a local library, we've got to protect that. So having young people go to a higher education school and be able to be open and speak their mind and make mistakes sometimes, as long as they're legal and don't hurt people, that's part of education. So we're going to fight with this too. We're fighting on all of these things. But the way to fight in an environment like this is for us in the Congress, even though we're in the minority, is not to say, oh, we're in the minority. We put pressure on the majority to get them to get on the record and say, well, why wouldn't you do this? We have to work with partners in the courts who are being successful. And then we have to get out on the streets, like I do regularly, every weekend almost, to peacefully, lawfully work with law enforcement to demonstrate our public opinion. So all of those things is what Americans are required to do. And most importantly, we've got to get young people and everyone registered to vote and vote. A third of the country didn't vote in the last presidential election. So that's not a functioning democracy. Our numbers were going the other way. And when you look at other democracies, they have higher participation rates. And I've done a lot of work on this. The UK does a really good job of, not surprisingly, the research they have shows that when kids understand civic engagement, there are three branches of government, why we have the government they want, the likelihood of them being frequent voters and reading their voters' pamphlet and being knowledgeable is significantly higher. We need to do more of that in this country. I just had a wonderful meeting with a bunch of AP students at Doherty Valley High School. Oh my God, those kids are so smart. But the principal and the teachers and I were talking about afterwards, let's create a model here in Contra Costa about how do you get young people more engaged in government so that they know when they turn 18 what their responsibilities are. I mean, people have died for the right to vote. People have gotten beaten up for the right to vote. We need to make sure that people, if they're really respect this country and want it to be a good place, irrespective of their party affiliation, they need to read the voter's pamphlet and vote regularly. And the fact that a third of Americans didn't vote in a presidential election is a very sad statement on all of us, myself included.
Great. Next question is from William. William asks, the administration seems to have declared a trade war with all of our oldest allies. The only country to get a zero tariff pass seems to be Russia. Have you heard a reason with it, why Russia is so special?
Well, I have my opinions. I was on the Oversight Committee when the Mueller report came out. And okay, I got it. I had some comments, but the filters work there. It was mostly directed at my humanity. So the Mueller report, it's happening in this country, and it's happening with our adversaries in the world. They're using technology to influence us and voters, and it's based on their truth as opposed to our truth. Their relationship with people in this country, the Mueller report didn't really talk about that. It just talked about what they had found in terms of what the Russians had done. But it's happened, Americans are doing it to Americans as well. So that's why the inoculation against this is having people who are well informed and know when people aren't telling them the truth and when they are telling them the truth. We don't have the kind of framework that we used to have with traditional media where there was more accountability, just culturally, and now because of how people get information. And it's very targeted. What we've learned, and there's a lot of good research and books on this, that people are using what we've learned about neuroscience and brain imaging in the last 50 years. The University of California at San Francisco is the second largest recipient of National Institutes for Health grants after Johns Hopkins. They do great work on this and most of it's positive, about how we know about brain diseases, but also how we know about cognitive development and retention. And unfortunately, we haven't set the rules as a culture in Congress and legislatures on what the parameters of how people use that to mislead people. We've done this in radio and television years ago where you had to get a license. So I have a couple bills that would at least require Facebook, for instance, if they took something from the New York Times and published it, they'd have to pay a licensing fee, which is what we do in film and recording industry. There's been a lot of talk about that. And we have a number of bills like that that would try to start making people be more aware. I have a bill with Kathy Castor, a friend from Florida, that would do for the internet and for kids and parents what we do for tobacco and liquor. Just when you go on, there'd be a warning sign that says the Surgeon General has found that this is potentially dangerous for people and for kids. And those work. I passed one of the first secondhand smoke ordinances when I was a city council member and a restaurant owner. Boy, they were mad at me. But those kind of things worked. Senator Padilla and I passed, when we were in the legislature, the first menu labeling bill, state bill in the country. So when you go through McDonald's, they're required to have nutritional impacts on there. It works, mostly because moms read it. So that if we did that for technology, that would be really helpful. Back to the question about who's manipulating things, this is a huge problem for us and for our democracy. It's how people get information and how people are cognitively developing so that they won't question the information. I mean, we're all wrong sometimes, we're human. So I have many conversations with people who just say, I'll say something that is my opinion based on the information I'll have, and they'll say that I'm lying. And I'll say, well, okay, where'd you get your information? And the response usually is, I don't know, somewhere online. Well, that's fine. It can be really helpful, but we're right now in an environment where you have to be aware. In this country, when we were founded, we changed contract law. You'll spend hours and lots of money on this at Harvard Law School. We flipped what the Romans and the Greeks did. We went to caveat emptor, which means buyer beware. So there are liability laws, but they're not as strong as Europe has. So there's more of an incentive to people make sure that whatever they're telling you or selling you, it's accurate. And in this country, they did it for a good reason. They wanted people to take risks, and it's been beneficial. But we also can put legal constraints around that particularly around information, so people at least are aware that what you're getting might cause A, B, or C, and there's some research around that that is peer-reviewed and objective. So we just have to stay on it. And I just finished a book called, oh God, why am I spacing? A neuroscientist who wrote a book called The Shallows, which I loved 20 years ago to talk about this subject. This one's called Super Bloom, and he starts by, the Super Bloom part is an influencer who's got millions of people, does a scene, what influencers do, at a meadow that's got all these beautiful flowers blooming, and within a week it's trampled because everybody goes. So the sort of what he's saying is this is the tragedy of the commons that social media is giving us right now, and we have to have some thoughtful constraints to that, and we'll figure it out. But it takes a while. In the meantime, we're really having some risks, particularly to young people. The Surgeon General during the Biden administration and the Center for Disease Control did a very significant study that's available publicly that said that a lot of these social media companies are targeting particularly adolescent girls, 12 to 13-year-olds, because girls develop their brain faster than us and shows the rest of our lives. But they were targeting kids who they got data, the algorithms were, who are more prone to depression. And they were feeding that depression. A New York Times reporter actually found out that some of these algorithms would take these kids all the way through to a YouTube was doing it, to show them how to commit suicide. So a variety of getting kids more depressed while their brains are forming so that it'll be a lifetime problem. So we have, when he came out with that story, YouTube apologized, said we've got to be on it, but we have to have rules so that doesn't happen. Specifically to the question, though, on politics, we've really got to be careful about this because people are voting against their interest, and it's quite deliberate. The people who are trying to get us to vote against our own interest.
Great. Next question is from Arlie. As a therapist, my patients are fearful of reports of ICE breaking the law and forcefully dragging people out of their vehicles. How do we respond to these reports, and what can we do?
I love it. I'm in a town hall in the Bay Area, and I get a question from a therapist. I was talking to a colleague some years ago from the South. He was a friend, Republican. I just happened to slip. You know, my therapist told me this, and he shook his head. He said, only a member of California would admit they're using a therapist. And I said, that's the problem. You're the ones who need them. He thought it was funny. Well, what I would say is, that's why we have these fairs, is there are nonprofits, there are faith communities, and there are people all through the community who want to help. But this is one of the damages that this kind of policy, what we say is important, particularly people in public office, and particularly if you're the President of the United States. You've got to be thoughtful about what you say. And sometimes people think we're too controlled, and we can be. You've got to be authentic and about yourself. But you've got to think about the consequences for people, good and bad. And I think these fear things, and particularly to this community, but to everybody, we talk about this in the office. We went from before January 20th, we got 1,000 emails a week. We now get over 5,000 emails a week. This is for 15 people between our 3 offices in DC and here. There's a lot of stress in the world right now. So there's even more stress for the community that you just brought up. So we've got to be supportive, and we've got to protect them, and we've got to allow them to have due process too. If people don't believe in the institutions, if you don't believe in the police, if you don't believe in the courts, question us. That's part of America's history. There's a book by Gary Wills called A Necessary Evil, and he talks about how this country has always questioned electeds and institutions because of how we were founded, that the people who came here had seen institutions not work in England, including faith communities, when towns were supposed to be Catholic with one monarch, and then they were supposed to be Anglican with another one. So people had lost their faith in institutions. So it's part of our job to question institutions, and particularly public ones, and the people who hold office in it, from city council, not you. But on the other hand, we have to have faith that people are being truthful and honest, and if people, particularly in a position like President of the United States, isn't doing that, it creates this ripple effect that affects us all. It affects 7.4 billion people who are flying around on this little planet, and particularly the 330 million people who live in this country to varying degrees. And if you're a child and you're one of that group that's being targeted all the time, you're more impacted, and that impact doesn't go away, as the therapist knows. It stays with you for the rest of your life.
Great. Next question is from William. Will you travel to El Salvador to press for the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the U.S.? If not, what else will you do to ensure the Constitution is followed for all those who were sent to the Seesaw prison from the U.S.?
Yes. Yes, when I saw that Senator Van Hollen was going, Chris Van Hollen is from Maryland, wonderful member. He's a friend. He used to serve in the House. He went. I think he's down there now, but he hasn't got access to talk to Mr. Garcia. So I think there should be more of us going down there and saying, you want us to appropriate funds for your government, then there are conditions on that. And one of them is, there's someone who's in this country who was illegally brought to this country. The Supreme Court has said he should come back. You can't say you're not interested in doing it and still get us to appropriate funds to help your government or to help your country.
Next question is from ED. Why isn't Congress taking a more active role? The public and voters need to see, hear, and feel the opposition of those they voted into office that oppose Trump and make it be known on the national forefront.
So did everybody hear that? It's similar to the first question about why aren't we being more active? And I tried to answer that, to admit that we weren't prepared. This is my opinion. Not all my colleagues feel that way. But we're trying to do more. I mean, I've done more town halls, as I've told you, in the 10 years I've been in Congress in the first place, but we've done 5 in 3 months. And these are hard to do, by the way, because we need bigger venues, we need more security, we need more technology to get it right. And we're all working a lot harder than we have. But you're right, we're doing more things on the floor. But the process in Congress, particularly in the House, is very much dictated by who has the gavel, as Nancy Pelosi used to say. So who has the speaker? The speaker is got more power than I think they should. I mentioned about how legislative bodies have different constraints over the leadership and requirements. And personally, I think for both parties, there's too much power vested in the Speaker's office. It should be spread around. And there should be a process where we respect the minority rights. Right now, the biggest tool we have is trying to convince them to support our bills or get on our bills when we put them on, because that sends a message. If I get 3 Republicans to start impeachment, that sends a message, because I'm going to get every Democrat to do it if you did it right, and went through the process. So there's one other vehicle to do that, and the rules is called a discharge petition. You take a bill down, and every member has to go down into the well and sign it in front of a clerk so they know who it is. But you have to get to 218 because that's a majority of the House. So we've had bills that have gotten every Democrat to sign on it, but we haven't been able to get 3 of the other party to sign on with us. So we've got a series of discharge positions to try to put more pressure on them. And one would be is that at this point, when he defies a law, a court order, then this is what starts impeachment. If that's the vehicle you have, then ask Congressman Raskin, as a constitutional lawyer, help me where that line is, and then you immediately start it. So at least it would send a message to my colleagues and to him that we're not messing around, we're not asleep, and we're going to push as hard as we can. We shouldn't be, in a normal time, you wouldn't be doing impeachment proceedings, but this isn't a normal time. It's the vehicle we have.
Next question is from Barb. Is there a serious attempt to create a constant time schedule, standard versus daylight savings? Why can't we meet halfway and make it a half hour between the two?
That's great. I've never heard that one before. The wisdom of Solomon when it comes to daylight savings time. I'll find out if we've got your contacts. There is a movement to just get off of daylight savings time in the Congress. And it happens every 2 years, but it's gained more momentum. But I like the half-hour thing, the art of the compromise. Do you have like a chair at Harvard Law School that you can share with everybody? Or? I'm only teasing him because I love him and I'm proud of him. Yeah, you do. You should.
Next question is from Kerr. Why is the Alien Enemies Act still in play? It is revocable once people get to CSOT. This opens the door to anyone to get disappeared.
I'm not sure I heard it. One of the problems with standing up here is I'm not hearing the speakers.
Why is the Alien Enemies Act still into play? Essentially, it helps people get into CSOT and anyone can get disappeared, as they say.
Yeah, so this is a very old law that the president is citing for what he's done to Mr. Garcia and a lot of these other things. There are old laws that we should go back and revisit, say they don't apply anymore. One of the things I actually tried to do in the California legislature is Texas, everybody does good things sometimes, they have what's called a sunset committee that reviews laws and make recommendations and say, well, you know, this was passed in the 1800s, really doesn't apply anymore, it's time to get rid of it. I actually think that would be a good idea for Congress to do as well. And you'd have the courts opine and legal experts, because there might be something you're missing. But what the courts are saying is that he's not interpreting the law the way they are. So they're putting brakes on him, but the law shouldn't be there probably anymore anyways.
Great. Next question is from Amy. Illegal immigration is killing my small business. I can't compete against people who don't pay income taxes and state taxes. How are you helping small business owners and their employees?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with this. I owned restaurants for 35 years. It's what got me into politics. The local Chamber of Commerce asked me to go on the planning committee before I went on the city council. And as a restaurant owner, it was very frustrating because I was competing against restaurants who were taking a risk. But it was a fairly calculated risk because there weren't enough enforcement officers on sales tax, on payroll tax. So I always said I'm competing against people who have a 20% cash flow advantage against me. Now they're risking losing everything, but as my accountant, my CPA once said, well, that's a risk assessment they do. And I said, that sounds so bland like a CPA, but it really undermines things. So what we need to do is up the fines, and this is a primarily state issue. I'm trying to think where federal taxes would apply. I'm sure there's some of it. But I'd be happy to talk to you if you've got ideas, because of my experience was like your experience and it's going on. We had hearings in the legislature when I was up there with a colleague, Mimi Walters, who came to Congress but didn't get reelected last time, about the underground economy in California. And it really hurts everybody because everybody should be paying the same amount. And then we should make sure that those investments are being used, taxpayer money is being used well. But people know that they're probably not going to get audited because we don't have enough auditors. And it's ironic in sales tax because most of the transactions now are by credit cards, which are easy to follow. The restaurant business used to be famous. I never did this. It used to be called privates. What are your privates? That means how much of the cash at the end of the night do you take home and don't report it. Now, there's a methodology that's fairly accurate that the Franchise Tax Board and the Board of Equalization for different taxes go in and audit, and I'd been audited, so they can find out how much you're taking that you should be paying. But it's easier now, ironically, because there's a paper trail, because most of these purchases, whether you buy lunch or dinner or a TV, you're not paying cash for it. So it's a real statement that it's so bad, even though it's easier to hold people accountable. And then I would say some of the consequences aren't steep enough, some of the fines. So, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it. I'd love to have your ideas, because to the degree I could work at it in my current job or get friends and colleagues in the legislature to work on it, it's really important.
Next question is from Gabriella. I work with immigrant families on the Monument Corridor in Concord. Families are terrified about ICE deportations, but mostly being sent to prison to El Salvador. How can Congress stop this inhumane practice?
So you can call our office. The people who are here today, many of them will help you with that. A lot of them work in communities like the Monument Corridor in Concord. We usually do these town halls, most frequently we've done down there, so that these resources are there. We chose to do this one just for geographic purposes of moving around the county. But that would be my suggestion is let's help us, Jerry Maguire here, help us help you. Just talk to our office and we can work with the nonprofits and the faith community that can help you with that. Holy mackerel.
And we'll do about 2 more questions. And just a reminder again, if your question wasn't answered tonight, we will give you a response after the town hall. Next question is from Brian. Is there a way to ensure that Concord Police will not arrest protesters this coming Saturday at the BART station event?
There's a way to guarantee. I don't. Do we have anybody in a position of power from Concord? Yeah, right. My suggestion is to work with them, follow the law. These events that have been in Walnut Creek that I've been at, we work closely with the Walnut Creek Police Department. We, the people who organize it, not me. But they've been great. They're peaceful, they're respectful, and everything works fine. And I'm sure Concord will follow the same policy. Would you like to, council member, vice mayor? Don't let the power go to your head, vice mayor.
Is the power on?
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So many of you have probably heard that there will be a peaceful protest happening in Concord. And this is to mark the 250th anniversary of the events that took place in Concord, Massachusetts, when the revolution started. The event organizers, as far as I know, are working very closely with the same people who bring you the Saturday rallies outside of Tesla in Walnut Creek, and there are it's a peaceful protest. We have people who monitor the crowd, make sure everyone's following the rules, and it's actually a lot of fun. And what I've really enjoyed about being there on Saturdays is that it is a great feeling, a great sense of solidarity. But the Concord Police do know about this, and I have a lot of faith that the people who are attending the rally and the law enforcement in Concord will work well together. Thank you.
Thanks. Nice job, Laura. Usually when you give a microphone to another politician, you never see it back. So, no present company accepted for that.
Great. Final question is from Cheryl. Suggestion only for future town halls. It would be nice to allow constituents to interact verbally with the congressman with their questions/concerns against the question card. Thank you for the great that all you do.
Okay, thank you. We do this because I've gone to a lot of town halls. It facilitates being able to have more questions answered. We do it the other way too, where we'll recognize people when they stand up. Unfortunately, it facilitates people who want to be disruptive when you do it that way too, so there's a balance in here. And sometimes this happens with electeds a lot when we have question time. They do a speech and there's rarely a question in it. So somewhere in there, we're trying to balance that. And this has worked very efficiently, and it also allows our staff that work so hard to answer all the questions, because if they've got the contacts, they can still send you a question and we work together on it. And I will also answer questions after this virtually at some time in the future, so we continue to try to do it both ways. So, are we done?
Yes, if there's
6
additional
minutes,
time,
oh,
we can
bonus time.
ask a few more.
Sure. Can I answer a question in 6 minutes?
That's the challenge.
Hey. You're my member of the council, aren't you? I live in your district.
Next question is from Desiree. Why would any Democrat vote for the SAVE Act?
Why didn't anybody?
Why would any Democrat vote for the SAVE Act?
I don't know why they would. I mean, it's an awful act. It's fortunately not going to get the votes in the Senate, but it's about disenfranchising people and making it harder for people to vote. And I think that's about as un-American as you can get. We want informed voters, but we also want to make it easy for people to vote. It's, you know, people have 2 jobs, a lot of demands on their time. We want to make it easy for people to be informed and to vote. What could be more American than that? So I don't know why anyone would vote for that. It was a horrible bill. I will say on that subject matter, there are people in the Congress and in this country who do make the argument that we're not a democracy, that we're a republic. And they will usually refer to the founders. When the country was founded, only white men who own property could vote. The way I read the founders, and I've done a lot of reading, is that they believed as literacy rates went up, Franklin in particular, that people would be able to vote for their representatives. So that's my argument against this, but there are people in regards to that question, a lot of these questions, who think when they convince average voters to vote against their own interests, they're demonstrating their point, that it's supposed to be a republic in their view, and a select group of people are supposed to make the decisions. I don't feel that way. I hope most people don't feel like that. I believe in everyday voters. Sometimes they disappoint me recently, but I ultimately have faith that de Tocqueville had many great lines, but when he came and looked at America, one of his brilliant, I think my favorite line for de Tocqueville was, he said, when he went back to Europe to explain what was happening in America in the late 1800s, he says, America is founded on a simple premise that you can expect extraordinary things from ordinary people. Not always. And I guess you could say extraordinary could be taken 2 ways, but I think in de Tocqueville's message, it was aspirational.
All right, last question is from Tom on a similar topic of the SAVE Act. Why is verification of citizenship something you don't support in the SAVE Act?
Because this actually goes back to the founders. People will say, well, you had to be a citizen. Well, you had to be those categories you were, but a lot of people weren't citizens. You know, there wasn't the infrastructure we currently have. So the Constitution says, the current president wants to change this. If you were born here, you're a citizen. So we follow those rules as they've evolved. What happened, the research, we spent a lot of time, I was on the elections committee in the state senate on this, and we did a lot of money on research. The technology has worked in terms of verifying signatures. So the people who sign when you vote, they match it. Now it's not randomly, it's done scientifically, so not every single one, but now the technology is good at being able to verify, yes, that signature is accurate, and the private sector uses this as well. I've been suspicious of that, but what we've gotten from peer-reviewed, nonpartisan research is the current system works, and there are people who don't have IDs, for instance. It's been in the SAVE Act, they want driver's licenses. So there are people who don't have driver's licenses in the United States. They're poor, they don't need to drive, and they don't have IDs. Now we have real IDs because of concerns about traveling and terrorism. But that's the reason is that the system works, and historically, it's not that we're trying to facilitate non-citizens to vote, is that the safeguards have worked so far. And we should stay on it, because if they don't work, then we've got to address that.
Great, so that'll be all for tonight. We want to thank you all for joining us this evening at Charlottewood Middle School. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all, and we have a town hall in Lafayette, Walnut Creek next week as well, so follow our website, and if you didn't get enough boring comments from me, you can come again next week. Thank you.